Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mikey Arnold, signing on to the Sign Off of Frameworth podcast for yet another week. It is the podcast where we talk about all the stories you didn't know you wished you knew about the world of sports and sports marketing. My name is Mikey Arnold, as I mentioned earlier, and I am joined in studio on this special holiday festive day of recording with the president of Frameworth Sports Marketing. It's Brian Aaronworth.
Jeez, I forgot to wear my fancy sweater.
You forgot to wear your fancy sweater, although by the time this episode comes out, a little peek behind the curtains, we're recording a little bit ahead of time. It will be past Christmas, so I will look like the doofus for wearing a fancy Christmas sweater on camera.
Should I be wearing like a New Year's sweater?
Yeah, let's call this sweater a New Year's sweater. Let's pretend that's what this is. It's for those of you watching on YouTube, a little bit of a video game themed sweater. It's come up a few times on this podcast that I am quite a bit of a nerd.
Save it for the retrograde.
Yeah,
okay.
There you go. Yeah, the retrograde. If you're a video game fan, you can search the Retrograde podcast over on all of your favorite podcast platforms. But for today, we're listening to a different podcast, and that is the Sign Off. As we mentioned at the top of the episode, a little bit of housekeeping as we do at the beginning of every episode. Want to give a shout out to everyone who's been rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the podcast. The numbers keep going up. Look at me, Jim Cramer over here. I'm saying bye on this podcast. Also, NSYNC would say the same thing if this were the 90s. But we want to give a heartfelt thank you to everyone who's taken the time to go out, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. As we have mentioned, we're going to do this at the beginning of just about every episode. Read a rating and a review from iTunes or one of the podcast platforms and give a shout out, to the person who wrote it, and also a little bit of a gift to the person. We're in that mood. It may be past Christmas for you at the time of listening to this, but it is just before Christmas, and all through the night, not a creature was stirring, not even a gift prize that we're going to be handing out. The rhyme didn't come to me. Listen, this one is posted on Apple Podcasts, GRTONE 99, Great One 99 via Apple Podcasts. One of the best is the topic, 5 out of 5 stars. If you are a memorabilia collector or just have a passion for sports, this is one of the podcasts that should be on your list. They have amazing guests who tell great stories. Absolutely 2 thumbs up and 5 stars. But what should you expect from one of the best in the business? Keep up the great work and keep the content coming. Great 199, we will keep the content coming, and you keep your emails coming to signoffpod@frameworth.com. Reach out to us within 30 days, and we're going to be sending you a signed Carey Price photo.
That's great. I mean, we do appreciate it. Thanks so much for the kind words. And you said that we have great guests, so it's just you and me today. So am I the guest? Or
I think you're the guest.
Okay.
We have
so average guests.
Fantastic
sometimes.
Hosts,
yes,
though.
Yeah. Just a little heads up about speaking of guests. I've now tried to line up. Your job is to host this thing and do a great job. My job is to try and line up some amazing guests, and I've got word that we do have some amazing guests coming in. Just talked to Paul Coffey yesterday, who's agreed to come on in the new year.
Hell yeah.
Talked to Denny Savard, who will come on in the new year. Happy to do it. We've got a few others that I'm lining up right now. And you never know, some of the great ones that might come on as well.
The great ones. Okay. Yeah. Maybe a little bit of a hint drop there. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Another one that you maybe we could get some feedback on is some of the parents of some of the players that we deal with. I think we would like to do a show about what it's like raising a superstar.
Right.
Maybe more than one.
Well, let me ask you this, Dad. What is it like raising a superstar?
I'd have to find out. Let me get Troy and Trina's take on that. No. Hey. I'm happy with the kids that we brought up.
You're saying that was the most half-hearted. I'm satisfied with the kids we brought up. It's okay. We did all right. Well, listen, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, so we'll go with that. A special episode today. We wanted to do something a little bit different. We've been talking about this for a while. We wanted to kind of turn the microphone towards the listener and get some of your questions and some of your feedback and read it live on air. Not the ratings and the reviews, but some actual questions from collectors. So we went out to some of the Facebook groups and we had a call to action for any questions that you might have. And we're going to use some of those questions as a jumping off point to kind of talk about our year in review. It is the last episode of the year that's going to be coming out. It's just before the New Year's. And what a better opportunity to kind of go and talk about all the changes
right.
and things coming up. And we'll, as we mentioned, use some of your questions as a jumping off point. So why don't we get right into it, Dad? Are you ready to
I'm ready.
Let the collector hold our feet to the fire and give us some questions like this? start off with a kind of a softball here. We got Michael Corvin. He wants to know 2 questions. One, and this is something that I'm curious to get to because I kind of know the answer, but I'd be curious to hear your take on it. Question 1, are there any pieces that as a business get signed by a player in bulk but aren't immediately released to the public until years later, similar to aging a wine? If so, can you give us a peek behind the curtain of what some of those might be and the ones you find most unique and interesting?
That is a really good question. The answer would be, I don't think we put anything away. I'm trying to think if there's anything I put away.
Years would be tough. We definitely wouldn't have done that.
But right now, I've got a whole series of products that we are holding back on because I don't like to release everything in one shot.
Right.
And so we have autographs that we have, for instance, our new Skyline series, which has been a big hit.
Right.
These are jerseys and canvases that include the skyline of the city.
Right.
The jerseys are really unique because it takes a special process to laser engrave the silhouettes of the jerseys, and we have, maybe you can show some later on YouTube. But we started with Sidney Crosby in Pittsburgh, and it was such a big hit that we included Yager and Malkin and Gensel in that series. And then we moved to Toronto and Montreal. We're going to include that line. So knowing that these are products that we are going to, that have been hot, when we do a signing right now with a new player or a player that we need more product from, we get those things signed in advance. But I don't want to launch 25 items at the same time, so we kind of slow play it and bring them out in groupings. And so those are products that might be launched over the next month or two.
Right.
With Sidney, because we don't do signings every month with him, or we go to his schedule. We have some great ideas. For instance, Sidney, no doubt, will hit his 500 goal mark shortly, and if they get back to playing.
Yeah.
And when he does, we've already prepared a bunch of product for that. Now it could take a month or two before we get him to sign that product, but hopefully it's quicker than that. And so those are products that we have in the works that we're going to do. There probably is some products that we've tucked away, but I would say we'd probably forgotten about them.
That does happen a lot as well. I think rather than, you used, Michael, the example of a wine. And I think with wine, there's an intention of releasing it 4 years after kegging it or something like that. You're right, Dad, to say that there isn't necessarily a specific time plan years in advance in a lot of cases. Sometimes we just know, here's kind of a taboo thing that maybe people in our industry don't like to talk about very much, but we have a lot of signings with older players. And if we have a signing with someone and they pass away, our immediate intention is not to just go straight to the market and sell everything we have. Sometimes we say, look, that was a special player. We know we can't get anything else signed from them. Let's tuck some of this stuff away until, we start to get a better sense of what the market needs in terms of this player's product. So that specifically isn't necessarily creating a product line around a player from the outset and aging it. In that respect, and along that same thought process, one of the things that does happen is from day one with Sidney and other players that we've done signings with, I don't know whether it was just a fluke or what happened, but I've always tucked away a bunch of the product for each of the signings. Right.
And consequently, and didn't realize how big an impact that would have. So you're seeing right now some of the stuff that I've tucked away that I'm releasing, like Rimouski jerseys.
Right.
When we first worked with Sidney, it was Rimouski, and it was a very reasonable price considering his stature, even playing in the juniors. But I tucked away maybe 25 jerseys, and then when the market went crazy over the last couple of years, partly due to COVID, we started opening that vault and moving some product into the marketplace. So that has been sitting here since 2005.
Right.
And it's stuff that is now being released slowly, one at a time. We don't have a lot of it. The same thing happened with Wayne Gretzky product when I worked with WGA back in the day. I always tucked away a number of each of his items. You're going to see the odd piece come out, even that on the pond piece where
Yep.
Mario Lemieux, Sidney, Mario Lemieux,
Bobby Orr.
Bobby Orr, and Wayne Gretzky
Yes.
walking through the woods. And so I didn't realize I even had those.
Right.
So I'll release one or two of those over the time, and they're extremely valuable, maybe 10 times what I originally paid for them. So that's the type of thing that
there's a tactic, and this, Michael, is more to your point. It's a great question because it is kind of multifaceted. It's not always about doing a bulk signing with the intention of holding things back. It's understanding that there is sometimes such a high demand for products that if we release them all at once, they would all go right now. One of our responsibilities as the distributor, creator, and holder of some of this memorabilia is kind of similar to that of like a bank. We don't want to flood the market in order to protect the investment of the collector as well. If all of the Rimouski jerseys that you had, Dad, right now, you just clicked a button and they were all available.
I would never
online,
do that.
You wouldn't, and if you did, the perception at that point in time would be these are fully available. Let's just buy them for whatever the cost is. And then, 10 years from now, the price would be crazy high because maybe we can never get them again. Instead, what we want to do is make it so that they are available at certain amounts of times when the market seems to be ready for a little bit more of a release. And in doing so, you're never punishing the collector who buys it at that point in time because the value always maintained. There's never a perception that these things are never going away.
Right. You want to maintain. One of our jobs here is to make sure that we don't bastardize the product, and we make sure that it as best we can maintains its value. And sometimes you can't control that, and et cetera. But you get a first round draft pick like Nail Yakupov coming into the league. You set it at a certain price, and he doesn't have the career that we anticipated, so it goes down in value. That's part of supply and demand.
Right.
But what we're talking about is actually a little different. What I tucked away was just a fluke.
Right.
It wasn't to protect the market at the time because it was only 10 or 15 items maybe of each one at the most.
Right.
And so that just me being a hoarder, and actually it was something that when my kids grow up, because this is 2005, you guys were young.
Yeah, I can't wait to grow up.
Yeah. So you're growing up now. I'm selling off your
My inheritance. Yeah, great.
But no, so we'll keep a few of everything for the family because I want something of everything that we did of Sidney to last. But at the end of the day, I didn't need that many, and so we're moving some of it. But that was really just because I wanted to keep a few things of everything, and it was a good decision.
Yeah, and that kind of I think maybe inspired or helped our decision making process in terms of how quickly things are released to the public as well, with some product lines moving forward. So great question, Michael. His second question, because he had a two-parter there. This one may be a little bit quicker to get through. Curious, Dad, from a collector's perspective, what is the one signature that got away from you or that you wish you had in your personal collection?
Well, that's a really kind of multifaceted thing as well. So, for instance, I think, I don't want to take all the credit from Upper Deck and companies of that stature, but when it came to hockey, I think we were at the forefront of setting the tone for grabbing players. We had Wayne Gretzky. I went and approached him back when he walked away from Upper Deck and started his own company, and we ended up doing all the work for that company. We have
episodes about that. The episode on Mike Brown, which would have been a few months ago, you can find in our back catalog, which details the rise of WG Authentic and how we originally got involved with them, is a really interesting listen.
Right. And so there was that one, but then we started, we grabbed Sidney, and then from then on, we were getting all the CAA clients, which were the top guys, and we approached Newport, and we got Stamkos, and we started controlling all the best players coming into the league.
Right.
Sooner or later, the big boys caught on and, started grabbing some of them. McDavid was one that I would have liked to sign and probably sleeping at the switch there. And Upper Deck eventually got McDavid. That would have been nice to have in our repertoire. But different guys that I could have got my own a group of autographs from him. I sat next to Muhammad Ali when WGA had done a signing with him back in the day and watched him sign for them and could have got in on that signing and didn't. Now, he was, towards the end of his life at that point, so he was having a hard time signing anyways.
Yeah.
But that would have been really cool.
You talk about that a lot, that moment a lot. It feels like, me as someone who grew up in this industry, collecting, people ask me all the time about collecting. As a collector, what do you do then? I literally don't have a signed piece of memorabilia at my condo on my wall. I don't. I appreciate the industry and the art of it. My personal thing is more about photographs with the players and
Yep.
those experiences. And it's interesting to hear you talk about Muhammad Ali with such a degree of reverence because, I'm a much bigger boxing fan than you are, but your appreciation for Ali and what he did for not just the sport.
Well,
before,
that's it.
so much
Muhammad
higher,
Ali
yeah.
transcends the sports world.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and he changed the world.
Right.
He changed the way people thought. At first, I remember thinking, well, he's a draft dodger.
Yeah.
They took his license away for boxing, and I'm thinking, well, he deserves it, et cetera, et cetera. But as I matured and understood what was going on in the world a little better,
Yep.
I realized what a huge impact he is. And I'm a bit of a historian. I love my history. I like to meet people that have had an impact on that.
Yeah.
A good story is one of my employees here. We did a golf tournament down in Cuba.
Okay.
And
For Frameworth?
for Frameworth, when we had a little event side of our company
In Cuba?
in Cuba.
I didn't know about this.
Okay. So you'll know this because our VP, Brian Duchek, who was not our VP at the time, he was working for the company, and he went down to kind of oversee it. And it was a big mining company that was putting it on. And the reason that they did it down there was they were doing a lot of exploration in Cuba. Of course, at the time, there was an embargo from the U.S., but this is, I don't know, mid-'90s.
Right.
So Brian goes down there to oversee the tournament. And at night, this is how big this company was that ran the golf tournament. At night, they had a big banquet.
Mhm.
And one of the guests for the banquet was Fidel Castro.
A guest at the
A guest.
banquet.
He showed up at this banquet because this mining company that was exploring all the mines was a big deal for Castro.
Wait a sec. Were you at this tournament?
No, I
you
didn't
weren't.
go.
Okay,
I wish
okay.
I did.
Yeah.
Because I love him or hate him, Fidel Castro had a big
An
impact
icon,
in the Cuban Missile Crisis and
Yep.
the Bay of Pigs and all that stuff. And he had an opportunity to go to this banquet, but Brian, being the partier and a young guy in his 20s, abandoned the banquet, never went to the banquet, and had a chance to shake hands with Fidel Castro
Wow.
and meet him, and went out and partied instead. And it just boggled my mind how he did that. And I don't think he would have done that in retrospect now
Right.
that he knows the impact, but chance to meet somebody like that, chance to meet Muhammad Ali firsthand.
Yeah.
To me, those guys change the way the world is.
Yeah.
And anytime you get a chance to meet somebody like that transcends the sports world, that's really cool.
This is where I want to say my piece on this because, too often, I was going to say so often, but too often when a person in the media, it can be an actor, it can be a sports star, speaks up and uses their mouthpiece, it's very often cut down and they say, stick to what you're good at, stick to what you know. You're a hockey player, play hockey, don't talk about politics, this and that. But every so often they take a swing and they stand up and they use a voice that they have and they become as impactful as, like, right now, or just now, you described two people, one of whom was a politician in a country that was at odds with the United States at a certain time, had an enormous impact on the world, and another was a boxer. And both of those people were used in a similar comparison because they both changed the world. People have the ability to do that, and all they're trying to do is use their mouthpiece. I will also say, you brought up a good point when Muhammad Ali, and this is getting a little bit off track, but when Muhammad Ali was doing what he was doing, he dodged the draft, he changed his name, he was causing a lot of political unrest. A lot of people hated it. A lot of people were not happy with it.
I wasn't at the time.
Right. And in retrospect, we understand what the impact was. So all I will say is when a player in any sport stands up to try to do what they believe is right. If you immediately write them off, you may find yourself on the wrong side of history. Try to look back at this moment now, 20 years from now, and understand, are you going to be the person in the movie that your kids are watching saying, how could people have thought that about this person? Even if you come around on it, try to have that
the
foresight.
world is changing. I know what my thoughts are on other things. I know what you're referring to right now, because you know what my thinking is on how you should segregate the sport from what you're doing.
Sure.
And you're right. Somewhere down the line, you may just look at Colin Kaepernick situation and go, that guy should never have done that. And then 10 years later, you realize that it was an important thing to do. I don't know. We're getting into political
as Dylan
now,
said, we'll soon shake their windows and rattle their walls.
Right.
Because the times they are a-changing. And we're going to change the question up a little bit to get back on track with sports. I don't know, a little detour that I don't mind making over there. Let us know your thoughts. Hit us up, signoffpod@frameworth.com. Call me an idiot. I don't care. Maybe we'll read it on air. Another question, kind of a softball here before we lead into some questions that I think we'll be able to dig our teeth into a little bit. Jamie Thomas has 2 questions that he submitted as well. One of the second one I really want to spend a lot of time with. The first one is something that I think can be sort of a jumping off point for something that I know, Dad, you wanted to talk about a little bit more. As a company, he says, Jamie Thomas, do you feel it's important to be first to market with an idea or concept? And if so, why?
Yeah, I do. I'm not saying it's always, it happens all the time and it has to happen to be successful. But that very interesting that you bring this up, because I literally just had this conversation with my staff this morning before our Christmas party this afternoon. Christmas party where we're not even having a Christmas party, but anyways, we'll give some things away. Being first to market. Over the summertime, I was having a meeting with our staff and in this very room, and I said, one of the things,
this room being the boardroom where we record.
One of the things that happened that Frameworth was noted for in the 90s was we changed the way memorabilia was perceived. And we've had this conversation before. Back in the day, it was an autograph, photo, puck, jersey. It may be cheaply framed, etc. What Frameworth did in the 90s was create this way to present the product in really cool ways. And it was different stuff.
Right.
It was different concepts of framing hockey cards and doing stuff that wasn't done before to any great degree or in any kind of big way. It was a custom thing that somebody would want their hockey cards framed into. We brought it to market in a production way. And over the years, we got busy with other things. We got big accounts. We got jerseys and players to deal with and all that. And I started looking at our line and I'm saying, look, this is the same as everybody else has. And what made Frameworth stand out and excel in the beginning was the unique product that even the big companies were copying.
Right.
And I started looking around when I get all the Facebook and Instagram posts and things from other companies, and I see what they're doing. I say, geez, that's really cool. And I'm saying, what have we done really cool in the last couple of years? So I had a meeting with our staff, and I said, we've got to create some really new, fresh, ahead of the curve kind of products. And so I said, everybody's responsible for coming to the table with their ideas once a week for the next 4 weeks. I need to see new ideas. And they did, and I just gave them all a big pat in the back, virtually, and said, "Guys, you've done an amazing job." So we've got Skyline canvases, we've got Skyline jerseys, we've got gallery pieces, which are 5-foot high canvases that are going to go crazy. We're having a great response on those. We've got frame and frame pucks. We've got about 20 new ideas that we are having a hard time bringing to market because I don't want to just launch them all at the same time.
Going back to Michael's question about do we ever hold off on launching? We have too many new things to launch right now.
Don't want to do it all at one time. And then we're looking at different versions of Crosby jerseys that have never been released and all that stuff. And boy, has that ever impacted our business over the last couple of months. You will find, and I've already seen people trying to copy the ideas. One of the things that we have an advantage of is our NHL licensing, so it allows us to do things that people shouldn't be copying. Some people do copy, but and unlicensed, but our products are all licensed. So that is absolutely essential if you want to stay on top of the business. Bring new things, exciting new things to the marketplace, and be ahead of everybody else.
Well, I mean, you kind of addressed this because you mentioned that it was recognizing some of the differences in the product lines of some of the competitors that inspired you to think, we've got to do that ourselves. Do you ever spend time looking at the competitors, not to copy their products, but for sort of inspiration in innovations that are out there, or are you more focused on just what we can do based on the technology that we have?
Absolutely. I'm constantly looking at, I have feeds coming in on Instagram from Upper Deck, from Fanatics, from
Upper Deck. I'll say this, shouldn't speak too highly of a competitor, but for a long time, they seem to be one of the most innovative companies in terms of testing out new products. They did a really good job at that when we were, as you mentioned, focused more on wholesale deals, on dealing direct with some of the retailers who maybe didn't want to take as big a swing on a change in products. They seem to have been changing their product lineup on a case-by-case basis or SKU-by-SKU basis. That was pretty impressive. And I think that may have inspired us to think, we need to breathe a little bit of fresh air into our product line as well. They've done a good job at that.
No, they are a quality company for sure, and they've got some really interesting products. A lot of that there's with the bigger companies, there's a mutual respect where you try to, if they're breaking through things that they're doing, et cetera. So kind of unique and don't want to do something too similar. Other ideas are more common,
right?
That, that works for them. It should work for us. And so we'll look at that. And I'm sure they do the same with us.
Yeah.
But there's mutual respect. And then there's other, and they're fully licensed, so they can do what they want. And so is Fanatics and Frameworth. It's when, companies that aren't, knock off photos and do that kind of bothers me that, we're paying royalties, they're not, so they can afford to do that. But that's a whole other
why don't we use that to address a little bit of, I hesitate to call it controversy, but something came up somewhat recently among some of the collectors' Facebook groups. We're sitting here talking about the innovations that we're trying to make in product lines. Some of the Skyline jerseys specifically came into question because with these innovations come a variety of changes to the costing measures that have to be taken into effect. And some people aren't fully aware of why those costing measures are resulting in such a high retail price or high price for the collector. So the Skyline jerseys, I think, was one example on these groups that came up, being a lot more expensive than some of the other items that you would find in our product line. A standard jersey versus the Skyline jersey, there's a pretty wide gap between those two products pricing. Do you want to take a little bit of time to speak to where that change in pricing comes from? The thing that was being thrown around was $20 worth of twill.
Right.
The twill being the thing that we're using to cut
Right.
the shape of the Skyline jersey, which from a collector's perspective, I understand how they could imagine that that's the only thing that plays into the cost. But do you want to speak a little bit about where those costs actually come from?
Yeah, the big thing that concerned me with that statement was, first of all, let's talk the Skyline edition. So the Skyline edition was research and development, trying to figure out how to do it properly for months.
Right. Which involves a staff of 50 people, 4 or 5 of which are dedicated to these new product lines and marketing.
They're always trying to find new things. Then getting it right was, how many jerseys got wasted, how many things didn't happen. Is that the biggest thing? No, because you amortize that over the whole course of the products. But then there's licensing, which we pay for.
Right.
Okay, so that can be upwards of 25%.
Right. More than that.
Yeah.
But when you factor, licensing can be NHL, NHLPA, Getty Images, and then also the player signature, which isn't quite licensing. But when in terms of percentages, when you factor in NHL, NHLPA, maybe the alumni and Getty Images, often that can be closer to 35% or around there. Yeah.
But the thing that really stand out the most was the conversation was revolving around Sidney Crosby in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do Skyline jerseys for anybody. We started with Sidney Crosby. The big thing with Sidney Crosby is Sidney, when we brought him into the marketplace was, higher than most autographs out there, but he was the highest or around the highest for anybody in the marketplace at the time for current players. Then you got your Wayne Gretzky's and your Mario Lemieux, which were above that because Sidney hadn't, done what he's done to
and
date.
He didn't start at that price either.
So eventually the prices go up, but there were standard products in the line. Now, about 3 years ago, I looked at Sidney's products and I go, and then I start seeing price lists coming in for McDavid and Matthews and those type of guys, and they were upwards of Sidney Crosby
in year one,
before they had done anything.
Yes.
They were anticipated and probably will have great careers.
Right.
They've already had good careers already, but they haven't done what Sidney's done.
Right.
McDavid, Matthews, Draisaitl, those kind of guys haven't won a Stanley Cup, haven't won 3 Stanley Cups, certainly, haven't got the gold medal, haven't done what Sidney's done, and yet they're being launched at a much higher price. So this Skyline jersey in particular wasn't about just the $20 worth of twill. It's every new product. We made a conscious decision that Sidney Crosby's prices should be commensurate with the other guys in the marketplace that are not even his stature.
Right.
So anything new would be in that price range. So it had nothing really to do with the Skyline. It is more expensive to produce a Skyline. So for other players, you'll find that there's a premium on those, but nowhere near what Sidney's was. And this was picking on Sidney's new product because it was substantially higher. But all new Sidney Crosby products are going to be in that price range.
Yeah, it's no different than the way that NHL contracts work in the league. You have one player sign an $8 million contract, and oh my God, that's huge. That's until the next big thing, even though they may not be as big as the person who signed the $8 million contract, signs a $10 million contract. And then the next person who signs says, well, I want to one-up that. Those increases are going to happen. And so long as nothing crumbles in the memorabilia or the hockey contract industry, those numbers are always going to go up. And I think I know that I agree with what you're saying in the sense that Sid should be up there with the other great players in the league, because I don't know that there's anyone in the league right now that matches his accolades as it stands right now. So to look at to know that there is Connor McDavid getting X amount, and to have been able to purchase a Sidney Crosby product for less than that does not mean that you should be able to moving forward. Just as it wouldn't be fair to say that just because Sidney had signed a lower contract at some point doesn't mean he wouldn't deserve to sign a higher contract at his next renewal.
So Sidney's standard Adidas jerseys are coming out at, or have been at, a regular price or a little more affordable price for a superstar. But the new products that we have, so we're slowly moving that up, which should be good news for the collector that wants a Sidney Crosby product or has Sidney Crosby products in their collection. Their collection has gone up in value tremendously, especially for those that got the original Rimouski jerseys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we brought those out at, I don't know, $600 back when he was first playing. They're probably worth $2,500 now.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing for the collectible business. For the average fan that just wants a jersey on the wall, no, it's harder for the average guy to afford them, but that's the collectible business.
Yep, that's how it works. No different than, just about any market where cost is involved and value is perceived, right?
Right.
Let's go into one question, an interesting one and a well thought out question. Mark Paradis Jr., who had actually won a prize not too long ago, I believe he won the Sidney Crosby photo, asks, I know on a recent episode with Tom Bitove, there was talk about putting a star player's brand at the forefront of all decision-making. Can you go into that a little deeper from a memorabilia perspective? For instance, has there been product ideas that Sidney has vetoed?
Yeah.
For sure.
Interestingly enough, the only thing Sidney will sign that is not a team that is, for where am I going with this? He will sign a Stanley Cup photo.
Right.
But he told me at one point he doesn't really like to sign things that were a team effort.
No, that were an individual effort.
So if it was
It's essentially what he's saying is he doesn't want to inscribe anything or sign something that makes it seem like he's taking credit for an effort that the team has put forward.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say.
He doesn't believe that if he gets an MVP award, that it's his award alone. He believes that it's often a team award.
That's exactly right. So he ends up not signing. And so people say, well, why doesn't he inscribe things? Well, there's two reasons. One, it's just so tedious to do inscriptions. So they're very rare for Sidney Crosby. And the second thing is, if it's just as you say, if it's an MVP award, that's a team effort in his eyes, not his own.
Right.
And he said to me, one of the few things that he will sign eventually is if he says, if I get inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, I'll sign HOF. And so, because that is an individual accomplishment in his eyes. So that might change.
I'm sure he wouldn't say that. I think maybe the reasoning he'd have not to put words in his mouth would be that the Hall of Fame is an institution. You know, it would be like if you go through for your doctorate, insisting on being called Mr. instead of Doctor. Like you did that is a measurable effect. You have achieved this, you have been granted this, therefore you should do what everyone else in the Hall of Fame does, signing HOF with your name. That so seems like he's honoring.
There are certain things that he will sign, but there are a number of things he said, I don't want to sign that.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Taves, another guy, doesn't everybody that is asking for things, if we did a signing, can you get him to sign Captain Serious? And he doesn't like that moniker.
Yeah.
He just doesn't feel it represents him well. So people ask for it because that's what, is in the media and all that, because he is very serious about the game.
Well, it's so funny because as on a personal level, he's as easygoing as they come.
Absolutely.
And I understand that because when I mean, obviously I've never played in the NHL, but in a recreational volleyball league, I'm the person who's like, guys, we play in 10 minutes. Get your ass out of the parking lot. Get in. Let's do some warm-ups. And it's like, well, don't take this so seriously. It's like, this is gamesmanship. I'm not a very serious person, I don't think anyone would say. But when it comes to a team orientation around a common goal, I want us to all be on the same page. So to be defined as serious when you just want to, as a captain of a team, ensure that everyone is headed in the right direction, it feels like a dumbing down of what it is you actually
Well, yeah, and we know there were circumstances back in the early days where he had to get his teammates under control. He was pissed that guys were taking things too lightly.
Right.
He wanted to win badly.
Right.
And as a captain, it's his role. And that's basically how he got the moniker. It was like basically telling guys, hey, you know what, game day tomorrow, or you're showing up to the practice after being out till 2 a.m. Get serious about this, guys.
Yes.
We want to win a Stanley Cup. That's his job.
Yeah.
And then I guess somebody picked up on it and called him that, and he didn't like that.
No, and it's, we talk about product lines that players have vetoed, and you mentioned Sidney and some of his inscriptions that he wants to kind of avoid doing for now. One from the opposite vein is sometimes we create a product line and the player likes it so much that they ask that we get them copies of that product for their own collection. And when we first started bringing canvases onto the scene, I remember that was enormous. Every time we'd roll out the new canvas in front of them, we'd apply a filter to it. I mean, everyone's familiar with the way our canvases look right now. If you're not, you can check them out at frameworth.com. But they have this sort of filter to them. They're big. It's a gloss texture to the way that they're finished. And the players would see them and immediately unroll it and say, like, I need one of those. Can you stretch those and frame it to me? My favorite one was Patrick Kane asking for like a 6 foot by 6 foot one that he could have for his place. I think it was of him maybe celebrating like the overtime goal for Chicago. Like, love that stuff.
Well, the canvases are hugely popular. And actually for Christmas gifts, I had one player ask for one for every player on the team that he wanted to give to.
Oh, wow.
Which sparked me to make sure that all my Maple Leaf exclusives or semi-exclusives got one of the Skyline edition.
Oh, nice.
Recent signings have had the players sign those Skyline with the canvases with the Skyline of Toronto or Pittsburgh or Montreal in the background. And they look so nice that the players, wow, this is really cool. Can I get one for my mother?
Yeah.
And then some of the guys said, hey, I want to give this to my teammates. So we ended up rushing a bunch of these, drove my creative department crazy because there was a lot of, on one it was pretty much the whole team the guy wanted. And that meant he had to create a canvas for every player on the team, which is a lot of work.
Yes.
Not so much if you're going to launch a product line,
Right.
but if you're only going to do one.
Yes.
And so
As a
in the middle
favor.
of the Christmas rush,
Yeah.
he's doing 20 different players that will never market, but that's fine.
Another player liked the canvas idea so much that he asked for his favorite wedding photo to be done up in a full canvas. I don't know. I doubt he signed it, maybe, but
Well, this whole canvas phenomenon is just a little off topic. Is in the new year you're going to see us producing canvases for non-related hockey. So, for instance, we just did a fishing poster for one of my players.
Oh,
And they don't know it's coming, but and I can't mention who because, well, I guess you'll hear it afterwards. But it's going to one of the Maple Leafs brothers.
Okay.
You know the one.
Yeah.
So, and we blew that up to 5 feet high.
Yeah.
And it came out great.
Yeah.
I was really impressed, and it was only a photo off a phone.
Right.
So that just got me thinking about launching a product line of non-related, like personal items, like your kid's hockey photo,
Yep.
like a wedding photo, because these look great as a full 5 foot high canvas. So this whole thing is, and we have the equipment to do it here, which most people don't. So
Yeah.
we can do it in-house.
Let's lead into just a quick question there. We kind of already addressed it, but it does sort of tie into what we were talking about with Sidney and his inscriptions. Bob Nagra also asks, lots of customers would love the idea of an in-person Crosby auto. I know it was done years ago. Could there be a possibility of that in the future?
Hey, Bob, good to hear from you. He's a good friend of mine, a decorated police officer out in Brampton. And I met him first, he had slept all night outside for our Christmas sale.
Right.
I was blown away when I got
years
to
ago,
work
yeah.
at 6 a.m, and there was Bob and some friends in a tent outside the front door to be the first in for our deal crashers. Anyway, so there's been a lot of requests for Sidney to do personalized stuff. So a couple of factors there. One of the things that we've always done with Sidney is frame up all the photos and pucks so that the thought process in the beginning was we wanted to set a standard for Sidney Crosby product that was always top notch.
Right.
And by signing photos, customers' photos or any photos and selling photos only or pucks only, gave the opportunity for anybody to take a less expensive piece and frame it up any way they wanted
Right.
to. One puck with a jersey and charge exorbitant prices because there was an autograph in it. And we wanted to keep the product line standard and controlled so that there was a certain look and feel to it. So that's one of the reasons why we did all of that. The second reason is that it's just so time consuming. Eventually, probably towards the end of Sidney's career, he will do some personalized stuff. I know there's a big demand for people that want to finish a collection,
Right.
et cetera. But on a selfish point of view, for instance, we had one of our competitors wanting to do a team signed Pittsburgh Penguins photo, and we controlled Sidney's autograph. So they had to pay a premium to get that. So we were the only ones that could
Right.
produce a team signed photo with all the autographs.
Right. Right.
And that's, just being competitive.
A little bit
in
of
nature.
gamesmanship, yeah.
I mean, we want to take every advantage we have. So if we control the captain and the best player on the team, we can control other products in the product range too.
Right.
Sometimes I'll try and make a deal with a company that has another player that would work well with Sidney, like Mario Lemieux.
Right.
And I might phone his people and say, hey, we want to do a Mario Lemieux Sidney Crosby product. And then there's a give and take. But I don't want somebody to take our player and benefit from it when we don't.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, Mario and Sidney, because I know that early on in Sidney's career, like this is how savvy he was to the industry, even from one of maybe his first year in the league. There was a photo taken of Sidney and Mario, and we thought, let's get them signed by each player. We obviously ran it by the agents and the representation and all that. But when we initially put it in front of Sidney and he saw that it was signed by Mario, he said, I'd be more comfortable if if before I signed this, I could talk to Mario and make sure that this is okay. Like he already wanted to make sure that no one was trying to pull a fast one. Like we did all our checks and balances, but he was already aware of the fact that the industry would demand things like that, and he should make sure that he's on the right side of what those requirements are.
It never ceases to amaze me how certain players are so savvy about our industry, and not just our industry, about everything around them.
Right.
Who's doing what, who the competitors are, whether it's in the apparel business, the memorabilia business, et cetera. Two guys that come to mind that are very sharp about these things. You can't, nobody's going to put anything by them, is Sidney Crosby. Wayne Gretzky is probably at the top of the list. He knows everything about everything.
Right.
He can tell you who the autograph hounds are that used to wait outside his restaurant.
Yeah.
And he knows them. We've had stories about that. So, and that helps us so that they can kind of ask questions and we, get to know what they like and what they don't like a lot easier.
Totally. I think we have time for one more question. And it's a question that I want to get into. And if you're out there and you did ask a question, we didn't get to it, we're going to save a lot of these for future. I'm enjoying this quite a bit. I think there's a lot that we can get out of it. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, reach out to us, signoffpod@frameworth.com. If you asked one already and we didn't get to it on this episode, keep an ear out because we will likely do another one of these. Maybe we'll do one once a month or something like that, a Q&A question. But for the last question, I had mentioned earlier that Jamie Thomas had two questions, and his second one is one that I think we should get to. His second question is, and I'm sure there are a lot of artists out there, Jamie's an artist himself, who might be wondering the same thing. And I think it's an interesting one because there isn't always a 100% clear, definitive answer to this, which we'll get into. Jamie asks, as an artist, I've always wondered about licensing. First of all, Jamie, thank you for wondering about licensing, because a lot of people wouldn't even think about that in the first place, which makes it difficult for companies that are trying to do things above board. How do I get my work licensed by the NHL, Jamie asks. Is that something that's even possible, or do you have to go through a company such as Frameworth or Fanatics, etc.? Is there separate tiers of licensing, etc.? I know a little about licensing, but I'm dying to know more. Love the podcast, and I've always wanted to ask that question. Thank you, Jamie.
So it's there's a little bit of gray area here. I've done a lot of homework on this myself. First of all, what we find is that over the years, we've been approached by a number of artists. Rob Scott's one out in the East Coast, different guys, David Arrigo, et cetera, et cetera. And what we found, to be honest with you, with artwork is it's a harder sell than actual photos, unless it's specific to a well-known artist like Leroy Neiman, et cetera. So you want to make a name for yourself. It's a little more work in the art business because the collectors are more inclined to buy photographs than artwork. However, that's not to say that artwork wouldn't work, and we've had some success with Rob Scott's pencil prints, and David Arrigo, of course, is well known in the art business. You see him at all the All-Star games, et cetera. With regard to the licensing, an original piece of art, and I'm not a lawyer, but the homework that I've done says if you do an original piece of art, it does not need licensing.
Right.
It's a one of a kind. It's an oil painting, it's a pencil drawing or whatever. It shouldn't need licensing, but I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you what I think.
It's not just, here's the thing. Regardless of what legally you can and can't do or should not be able to do, there's nothing stopping a licensing body from coming after you and giving you a cease and desist or trying to slap a lawsuit on you. Do they have the right to do so? Not always, but does that mean that you're necessarily out of the woods? Also not always, because if they choose to take things to court, you have to pay for that regardless sometimes. So that's always something to be careful of as well. The other important thing, and this may have been what you were getting at, Dad, is to create your own one-off print. That's one thing. If you wanted to make a facsimile of that, if you wanted to reprint it afterwards, that's when you're going to run into licensing issues.
So anytime you do more of a mass market type of thing or a larger run, then you're more susceptible to having licensing bodies come after you. Do they have the right to? I think they do.
I think if you're reproducing your initial print, I think precedent would lean more heavily towards the licensing body if you've done so without a license.
Right. So we've been approached by many people to work with them under the licensing and have it licensed under ours. Here's the reason why you'd want to do something, and it's a lot more reasonably priced that way, is that we have an existing license for artwork and memorabilia. If you were to go to, say, the NHL and the PA to get a new license, it's not just about paying royalties on what you're producing.
Right.
They don't want 1,000 licensees under their umbrella. They want people that can do a job for them and generate revenue for them. They don't want to have to deal with 1,000. So what they end up doing is asking you for a minimum guarantee, and that minimum guarantee could be $50,000 or $100,000 against royalties that are coming in over the course of a year or two.
Right.
Which means that if you're paying the NHL, for argument's sake, 10%, just for the ease of math, which it isn't, but say it's close. That would mean that if you'd have to do $100,000 in sales to generate $10,000 in royalties.
And what happens if you don't?
And if you don't, you pay it anyway.
Exactly.
And that's just for the NHL. Then you got the PA. Then if you use any of the images, say from Getty, as references, you got to pay for that. So people wonder why our prices are a little higher than the average guy working out of his basement, and that's why.
Right.
Because we do everything by the book. So if you were to get a license, paying a 25 to 30% royalties on a new piece of art that you generate would be probably, you could build that into the cost. But if that's the only thing you're doing, or you don't anticipate doing a couple $100,000 in overall sales,
right,
then you got to add that to the price, and that's where it gets out of line. So you're probably better off coming to a company like ours, whether we want to distribute it for you or not, and then we can put it under ours and license it for you.
So if you're curious, the way that something like that would work is you would, just to kind of make it as clear as possible, the one option is to go directly to the league and attempt to obtain a license of your own. With that, you're going to have minimum requirements that are likely going to exceed the run of the only, if you're only doing one item, are likely going to exceed what you would generate in revenue off of that one piece. The other option, and you would have to do that with each of the licensing bodies as well. The other option would be to go to a company that already has those relationships and those licenses, have them cover the licensing fees under their own existing contract.
Yeah, and we would sell the product
for you, and you would take a commission off of sales. Now, one of them, if your art does really well, if the piece sells out and you become an enormous name, and that's kind of, you're the next big thing in sports art, then that's probably the route you want to go, because you're not making a commission, you're making all of the sales and you're just paying the licensing.
Well, eventually then you get your own license, because you know that the numbers justify the licensing.
Exactly.
And that's a way to get around it, anticipating or having to gamble on whether your things are going to take off.
And so if you're an artist out there who's looking to strike a deal with an existing licensee to put your art out there in the marketplace, I would recommend that if they suggest an exclusive arrangement where you can only produce art under their license, you may want to consider not doing that. Unless you're comfortable committing, the next 3 or 4 paintings that you have. Do it on a case-by-case basis, because you never know how that initial one's going to sell. If it does really well and then you're comfortable selling it on your own moving forward, great. Right. If not, you don't want to find yourself like a recording artist in a record deal where they have to produce the next 7 albums for way less than they could have gotten had they shopped it around case by case.
And I will say this, is that I'm not out trying to gather all the artists around to come through our company to do it. In fact, we do not put very many pieces of art under our license, because we have a harder time selling art versus photographic memorabilia, etc. If something really stands out, then we'll do it, but generally not. It hasn't been a big market for us. Our collectors are generally looking for the other thing, but I've seen some pretty cool stuff out there. Leroy Neiman, his series that he did with a number of big athletes like Muhammad Ali and Wayne Gretzky, etc. Huge, and secondary market's massive. We had who's the artist that we did with Sidney Crosby's 2010? God, name escapes me right now. But we launched that Giclée print on canvas, and it did really well for us. So that was a big name artist with big name clients like Muhammad Ali, etc.
Yeah, I can't. It's funny because that was one of the first ones that we did, and I remember we had an exclusive arrangement for that artwork. It's a gorgeous piece. I don't even know if it's still available.
No, it isn't. We sold that out.
We sold that out.
I own the original.
The original, which is we
look for it in an NFT one day.
We talked about the massive new gallery canvases that we're doing. This is twice, 3 times the size of anything like that. Yeah. God, I can't remember. Dave England? No, not Dave England.
No.
We'll think about it. We'll think about it. Dave England was a player on the Penguins, so I don't think that was it. Regardless, great question there, Jamie. Thanks for sending that through. Not quite enough time to get to any of the other questions, but we will save those for later. So if you've already submitted it, don't worry about resubmitting your question, but keep an eye out. Or if you have something that comes up that off the top of your head right now, email us, signoffpod@frameworth.com. We'd love to address that on a future episode. In the meantime, Dad, 2021 is coming to a close. Any closing remarks, any thoughts on the year?
Yeah, well, you know what? Couple of things. One, we have a big following in a couple of different places, and people that know me know I spend a lot of time up in the French River in the summertime. So a big shout out to our friends at Hartley Bay and on the French River at Atwoods. Our friends in PEI, Tignish, listen on a regular basis. Like to say hi to those guys. Merry Christmas to all of you guys and anybody I've missed. To all of you out there that are listening, thank you so much for your support. This has been a lot of fun for us so far to do, and I get excited every day when the new charts come out and see where we are. And I'm a competitive guy, so I like to see us move up the ladder. And I'm a good friend with Bob McCowan, so I'm trying to get by Bob's podcast.
We've done it. We've done it a couple times, and we're hoping to find our way ahead of him on the charts again.
Yeah, he's there every day.
Not because it's him necessarily, but because if you get ahead of Bob McCowan's podcast, it means you're on everyone's radar, and that's ultimately it. And for all of the positive feedback that we've gotten from everybody out there listening.
On that note, though, before you move on and close this thing, I was just thinking, for anybody that we've utilize their questions on this podcast, we're going to send you a nice gift. So all you have to do is send us your address, or Mike, you know how to do that.
Sure. All right, let's figure this out on the fly. That makes sense. Reach out to me, signoffpod@frameworth.com if we did use your question on air, and we will I'll speak
and we're going to send you an autograph, something. I haven't figured that out yet, but we'll, once you send us your favorite team, and we'll see if we can accommodate you on something like that.
Perfect. That would be great. I just wanted to say once again to everyone out there who's been listening and who's been reviewing and rating, every so often we take a look at the reviews, and those are great to see. What I love is when people just reach out to us out of thin air and just let us know that they've been listening, that we've become a part of your regular weekly schedule. Obviously we like to go up in the charts, but the reason we like to go up in the charts is because we want to make sure that we're getting out to more people, and more people are enjoying the podcast. So my favorite thing is knowing that people are out there listening, caring, and waiting for the new drop of every episode every week. So to those of you who have reached out to give us a little bit of a shout out and some words of encouragement, thank you so much. It's the holidays. Hopefully you had a great holiday break. If you're celebrating Christmas, merry belated Christmas to you. If you're about to celebrate New Year's, stay safe, have fun, enjoy your family and your friends around you, and take a moment to take stock and just appreciate whatever you do have right now, in spite of the fact that this world is a crazy, weird place in its current climate. Thank you so much for joining us for 2021. We can't wait to see you in 2022. For Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth Sports Marketing, myself, Mikey Aaronworth, this has been the Sign Off Podcast, and this is us signing off.
Merry Christmas.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter @Frameworth Sport or Instagram @Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram @Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions and Sad Styles Productions. Executive producers Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth signing off.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it.